Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is your friend and your host, Kurunde Atani. Well, today we have a very special guest with us. Well, our special guest is Christian McNeill. Christian is an international mental health coach. She's a public speaker, and she's the co-author of the book Addiction: One Cause and One Solution. So, with pleasure and honor, let's welcome Christian McNeill. Hi, Christian. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Karen, and thank you very much for asking me to join you. It's a real honor. Um,
It's my pleasure.
and well, I was a lawyer for many years, and then but I had a kind of secret side gig when I was a lawyer, and um, coaching NLP, hypnotherapy, and I myself was in recovery from addiction and had been since my 20s. And I stumbled into what we're calling the three principles, or the inside out understanding. I stumbled into that around 11, 12 years ago. And I didn't realize, I thought I was on some kind of business development course for coaches. And in fact, I was being introduced to something completely different and new. And maybe it wasn't entirely new, but it was being presented in a way that I could really hear and hit me for a while. And long story short, after that, my life kind of just all sorts of changes took place. And within 2 years or so, I had become a coach working in that field. We sometimes call it a facilitator or a practitioner. And then about 3 years ago, along with my co-author, Barbara Sarah Smith, we started writing a book about addiction. She was someone that I met through the Three Principles community. She was based in America and I was based in Scotland, and we did it all in Google Docs, and we just went into one of those kind of flow states that people talk about, and produced our book, Addiction: One Cause, One Solution. I don't know if that's back to front on Zoom. I think it sometimes does that. Anyway, I don't only work in the field of addiction, and neither does she, but it was something that we both knew a fair amount about, and we could see the power of an understanding of the three principles to help people come to terms with addiction, to get a kind of upstream sense of what was going on, and also for people in recovery to really find a level of peace and contentment and fulfillment that might have been missing for them.
Oh,
so
great.
what yeah so anyway, that's we've connected on Facebook, and now here I am talking with you, which is a real pleasure.
Christian, I would like to start by asking you, what are the three principles and how do they help people overcome addiction?
The three principles are really, as I see it, the statement of a new paradigm in psychology and spirituality that kind of brings the two back together. And they kind of went in different directions, I think it would be fair to say, after the Enlightenment. And well, certainly, and I'm conscious I'm speaking to you here from Scotland, and you're in the East, and you've probably, this probably isn't so much the case where you are. But the three principles is really explaining how human beings work, socially, psychologically, and spiritually at a really basic, fundamental level. And they are truly principles in the sense that gravity is a principle, or the magnetism is a principle, and these are principles in physics. And then there are principles in chemistry, like the periodic table. So these are things that have always existed, but someone has come along and kind of coined an explanation of these phenomena. And Sid Banks, an expatriate Scotsman who moved to Canada, had a moment of clarity. And I don't think everything came to him in that initial moment, but over a period of time, he saw that there were fundamental truths that describe not the content of, but the manner in which people create their experience that apply to everybody, all people at all times, all countries, all religions, and none. And what was really, and just as in any science or any area, once the fundamental principles are revealed, it's helpful to people who know them because they can align themselves with those principles. So that's it. So the three principles are mind, thought, and consciousness, which I find not particularly helpful names because they're not particularly descriptive. But to my mind, mind describes the power of the universe. You know, there's just this constant power that's available to us that powers all living things, and arguably even things like mountains and everything. It powers everything in the universe. Consciousness is the capacity to be aware, and every human being that is born or is going to be born will be powered by mind. They will have a life force. I wonder if it's something like prana and or chi, you know, from borrowing from other traditions. And we also have human beings also have the capacity to be aware of themselves, to be aware of their experience. And the third principle is thought, which is much more than the busy mind that we can be aware of. Thought is really everything that humans focus on, believe, think about, our values. All of this is thought. It has a massive power, and it goes beyond that as well. But essentially, everything we think, we feel, and our feelings are always coming from not so much things in our life, the things that appear in front of us, but how we think about those things. And consciousness, it enables us to have to be aware of our experience, but also as we awaken to it, it enables us to notice that we are the thinker. And there can be relief in that, particularly for people who have felt like the victim of their feelings and circumstances. So that's the best I can do on the three principles. Anything that you would add?
Beautiful. Yeah, I was actually going through your website, and I also saw that you had been through many trainings, NLP and other things. So the way I've experienced them is that they all just come in our way of divine mind. It means the more we try those techniques, the more we get stuck in our thoughts. So would you share your experience with other trainings and what difference you found in the three principles and how they helped you change your life?
Yeah. Well, I did enjoy those trainings, you know, and I guess, you know, it was something of an exploration. It was the next thing and the next thing. But the fact that I was looking for the next thing was kind of testament to the fact that these were limited, you know, of limited efficacy. But they were, I mean, they certainly showed me the extent to which, or they began to show me something of the extent to which we create our own experience, and that it was possible for different people, or even the same person, to have different responses to a particular situation. So there was a kind of loosening, I guess, of the extent to which I, or anyone I was working with, had to be the victim of circumstances. But they were limited, and I think often these courses over-promised results and kind of, you know, a permanent nirvana, which never really happened. And as you say, the more, if the discomfort, if the mental discomfort you're experiencing is created by your own thinking, albeit innocently and invisibly, You can't get out of that by adding more thinking, and you can't get out of that by effort. What you have to do is have a different relationship to that thinking, to take it less seriously, to be less at the mercy of it. So the three principles is is not bothered by the content of your thinking. It's just saying this is happening all the time. It's part of the condition, and like everything in nature, we tend to go up and down and up and down. So what? It's if you know that painful feelings are not telling you about who you are as a person, they're not telling you about your future. They're simply telling you about what thoughts you're entertaining in a given moment, whether you're aware of those thoughts or not. They're less important. It's less important. It's as unimportant as a dream or a nightmare. And the principles are also pointing us to the fact that we have this wellspring inside mind, if you like, an unlimited source of wisdom and creativity, connection, love, resourcefulness, resilience, fresh thinking, and that every single person has that. So we start to look to what's eternal, this eternal wellspring versus this transient stream of kind of nonsense, largely in my own case, that goes through our thoughts. And this is more looking here rather than taking this seriously. It's very settling. It's very comforting. It brings a sense of security versus insecurity, where you're all over the map. And so it's not a case of changing oneself as you understand the principles. It's just the whole perspective shifts in the same way that once astronomers came to understand that we live on Earth in a solar system rather than a geocentric system, it changed lots of things. It gave it in that knowledge in itself explained anomalies. It made things easier. It solved problems, and it's something like that, albeit at the psycho-spiritual level, rather than at the level of earth science or astronomy.
Beautiful. Yeah, actually, I often see the principles the same way. Like earlier, a few months back, I just learned some advanced level of NLP in which I could just help people get rid of anxiety, their bad feelings quickly. So that's what I was trying for myself. And what happened? I kept trying it on and on and on. So those thoughts, they never went away because I was focusing on the content of the thought.
Yes.
But it's not about the content or the structure of the thought. It's about realizing that they are just thoughts.
Yes.
They are transient. Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. And I would like to ask you, these days I see there are many people who are suffering from addiction. Some people are addicted to liquor, alcohol, smoking. So I would like to ask you, what is addiction? And what is the cause of addiction? And how can people overcome it?
Yeah. Well, so this is my definition of addiction would be being unable to stop or stay stopped from consuming a substance or acting out in a way that's harmful to you, despite at times wanting to stop that, and continuing to experience some kind of harm or downside. Obviously, it depends on the addiction. That's sort of very general, but it's that loss of control thing. So it's, for me, addiction is not being a big drinker or spending a lot in a bookies or gambling, if you can afford it. I mean, it's this loss of control, the internal fight, drinking against your will or gambling against your will, or whatever the substance or behavior might be. And I think there are aspects of addiction that aren't fully understood, and there's probably a million roots into it. But the upstream cause, and this is the one cause that we refer to in our book, is the simple misunderstanding that this thing, taking this thing outside of myself, will make me happier. Now, you don't necessarily start, I mean, many people who become alcoholics start drinking in their teens. They're not necessarily thinking that thought to themselves, but they're drinking. There are steps into that. Perhaps they're drinking with their pals outside before a school event or something like that, or whatever it is. But it's this. There is this theme, this ongoing theme of this substance. Let's stick with alcohol to make it easier to talk about. This drink is going to make me feel better, and any good feelings that are experienced, and I mean, and alcohol has an effect on the mind, and in small amounts it can reduce some chemicals in the brain that make you anxious, and it can have a very short-term effect, and that's not all bad for some people. But if you begin to associate your capacity to feel good with the alcohol, you're mistaken, and but that can seem very compelling, and often it is associated with partying and socializing and getting together and having fun and being laughing and joking. So people can attribute all those good feelings that are actually internally created to the alcohol. And then there is a phenomenon within all human beings that we become habituated to things like that, and we want more. And especially because it isn't the true source of our happiness. So sometimes you'll take it and you don't feel happier at all. You might feel worse. You think the answer is more. And much of this is happening without conscious thought and reasoning. It's just it's just sort of happening. There's you just get you become, you keep seeking more and more and more of this thing, and then there might come a time when you suddenly realize all this, you're beginning to get a lot of side effects from it. Sorry, I'm just going to switch that off. Such as hangovers, or perhaps you're spending too much, or perhaps you're getting so drunk that you're, falling about, or getting knocked over, or getting into fights, or having inappropriate relationships. All of these things go with it, but because this core belief is so strong that this alcohol is my solution, it's my higher power. I mean, that's people don't use that language, but that's how it feels to them. The last thing on earth that they would want to consider is giving it up. They kind of find reasons to excuse all this chaos that can be happening around them, jobs being lost, bosses being furious, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's pattern is different, but if there's a loss of control around drink, it almost always gets worse. It's almost always progressive. And at some point, there may be a moment of clarity. I mean, if people can stop themselves and they're not an alcoholic, if they can stop and stay stopped, then they don't have that problem. But if they can't stop and stay stopped, that's really the definition of it. And and so there may be a moment of clarity. And I think, many people, so without any reference to the three principles, everybody I know who's in recovery now, who's sober, whether in an organization like Alcoholics Anonymous or elsewhere, everybody I know who was sober had a moment of clarity. They had an insight. And insight is one of those capacities that comes from our wellspring, from this eternal capacity that we have, from our unbrokenness. And I got sober in a moment of insight, and so whatever's happened before, there's a moment of change, and that is the one solution, and it may not occur spontaneously. That insight may come after weeks, months, or even years of trying to stop, because there is an element of mystery and even humility to this. It's not, insight cannot be conjured up at will. But if there's an openness to it, in my experience, if there's an openness, if there's a genuine desire and willingness to be free of the addiction, then insights will, small or large, will start to occur that bring about this freedom from having to keep on looking in that direction. And the more the person looks to their essence, to the source within, or the divine within, or to a higher power, a genuine higher power, not a substance, and the more certain person looks to that, then the more likely and quickly I think they are to become free of the addiction. That's how I see it.
Beautiful. So it's about having insight, and then
yeah, but when you say having insight, that that can imply almost an intellectual understanding. It's really that deep, a moment of deep clarity. I think that it is a gift. It's something that comes to us, and I think our part is something like willingness or surrender to the fact that I have this problem. Who knew? Sorry,
exactly. So as you were telling that insight, for some people it takes days, for some people it takes months, and for some people it takes years. So why does it take so long for them? What does it take a year?
I don't know. I think I honestly, I think that I don't have a good answer to that. I think sometimes people are they still want to hold on to the thing. So to give here's an example from my own life. I was drinking, I would now say alcoholically, for many years before I got sober, and then I had a moment of clarity, and the need to drink every day was just removed like that, just pronto, just gone. For a much long, I had only realized in the last maybe year of my drinking that I had a problem. I was doing it and I would try and control it and stop it, reduce it, but I didn't really appreciate the degree of the problem that I had. Simultaneously, because obviously I seem to be outside in on a lot of things, i.e. looking for answers out. Simultaneously, I smoked, and I hated the fact that I smoked. I was consciously doing battle with myself for years about that. I'd throw away the cigarettes. I'm not buying another pack. And then it'd be on again, on, off, on, off, on, off. I mean, years. And eventually, I was able to stop a year after I got sober. Why was the difference? Because I had much more certainty around the knowledge that cigarettes were not good for me, and yet I couldn't stop. And I think it was was holding on to. In my head, I had the idea, another false belief, thought that if I stopped smoking, I was going to be in a state of permanent craving for cigarettes or something like that. So that was a false idea, but I didn't know it. But that it led to an unwillingness to really let go of cigarettes. I didn't really want to, I wasn't willing to let them go. So that's one possibility. They hung around for much longer, even though they were clearly, there was absolutely no question in my mind that they weren't good for me.
Beautiful. Also, what I experience is that my wisdom is guiding me 24/7, no matter what.
Could you say that again? Your wisdom is what?
My wisdom is guiding me 24/7, no matter what problem I have.
Yeah.
So even problems that I used to have, they are completely gone. So I
Mm.
think it's mostly about the person not letting go of, as you said, they don't want to let go
Yeah.
of their addiction. They don't want to let go of the cigarettes or the alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyone who's ready, they will hear the answers.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And there can be a period of frustration where you kind of think you're ready or you want the problems to go, but you can't seem to make it happen. Then you find yourself doing the thing again. Now, I think what's really going on there is that part of you is ready, but there's still another part saying, not yet, not yet. There's a famous saying in Christian theology, St. Thomas Aquinas, who says, "Make me good, Lord, but not yet." or and I think there's sometimes that can be going on.
Would you talk about your book, Addiction, One Cause, One Solution, and also the co-author?
So Barbara and I met online. We were both speakers on somebody's podcast at different times, but I mean, just I like what she's got to say. I had that instant rapport, and just that hearing that ring of this, the ring of truth versus the tinny rattle, and she definitely had the ring of truth about her. So we kind of got to know each other a bit online and did some things together, and then we met up in her home. She's got a home in the Azores, sort of in the middle of the Atlantic, kind of halfway between where we each live. And we were both thinking about writing books, and we decided just to join forces. And I don't know whose suggestion that was. It just, just seemed right. And Barbara had spent her life being a psychotherapist in America and Massachusetts, and had spent much of that practice working with people in recovery or suffering from addiction. And I, having gotten sober in my 20s, had been in the recovery field since then. And in fact, although we have deliberately structured it around addiction, it really is about the principle. It is an introduction to the principles as well. A lot of it would be, I think, relevant to anybody who was interested in that. And there are many books, and this is just our take. We were both very influenced by Keith Blevins and his wife Valda Monroe. I don't know if you know them, but they were Keith in particular was our mentor for many years, and he has a very, I think, helpful approach to the principles, and it's really emphasizing that this is a new paradigm that's not being used lightly. People talk about new toothpaste and new paradigms, and they're just using it as a term of art, but he's using it very literally, and explains why. And he also, that it is a paradigm of no exceptions, that absolutely everything we feel is coming through us, not to us. That life is happening, that the stream of events of life are, it's coming towards us, and so there is those events are there, but the whole of our experience of it is being created by this internal mechanism, much of which is invisible and automatic, but and completely innocent. But it's useful to know that, because it addresses, we then address our attention in the right place. So in my case, I was no longer trying to change all the circumstances of my life in order to feel better. I could just allow them to be, and simultaneously allow my thoughts to come and go without globbing onto them in the same way, and giving more attention to the still small voice within, or the eternal within. And that's kind of what we wrote about in the book. We divided it into short chapters. We started off with a structure, and we just put in everything that we wanted to talk about, every title that we wanted to talk about. Then we put it into some kind of order. Then we said, I'd like to write about this one, I'd like to write about that one. It was a really creative process. It was really fun, and you know, we both really fully contributed, and we'd meet once or twice a week on Zoom and talk about, you know, things, and sometimes we're quite forceful with each other, but we never fell out. So yeah, I think we're really proud of what we've done, and I hope people find it helpful. We've had some very nice feedback. I hope people find it helpful as an introduction to the principles. We've both done a lot of writing before, and you know, wanted to bring that. I often find it easier to express myself in writing than any other way. And we have another one in the offing.
Great. Okay. All right. So, how long did that take you to complete the book?
We did the bulk of the writing in about 5 or 6 weeks. And then there was an editing process which took, you know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And then the actual publication was far more complicated than I had realized. And then we had had a deadline, because there was supposed to be a Three Principles in Addiction conference in 2020, May 2020, and we wanted to have physical books available for that, but it didn't happen because of the lockdown. And so we published just as lockdown was about to happen. So we haven't even had a book, you know, an in-person book launch or anything yet. We may yet, and we're exploring doing our an audio book at the moment.
And what is your new book about? Would you like to share something about it?
Well, it's, I think, more general, and kind of looking at the without trying to put down the old paradigm, if you like, of how treatment and therapy and so on have evolved. It's really explaining what's new now. You know, it's kind of explaining that the overview of what, you know, the old model, which was essentially that people become broken or damaged and need to have intervention, and then they'll be better. And that intervention often involves, you know, lots of looking at the past or you know, other people, outside causes. And that's the theory. But it's looking at that, you know, that why that didn't really work. And, you know, it is the case that it hasn't really worked. My last job in law was working with people with all sorts of disabilities, but many with mental health diagnoses. And you know, the story was always very similar. Nobody seemed to move, and Barbara experienced a lot of that in her practice and the practice of her colleagues. And you know, so it's kind of contrasting the old and what's different about this new paradigm, and simplicity. So it's looking, I mean, it's in one sense it's the same, you know, the same thing, because it's so simple, and yet there seems to be a great deal that can be said about it. And so it's a more general book. You know, it's not specifically looking at the field of addiction, but more generally, and also that an understanding of the principles, I think, can be really helpful even for people who don't have problems, as it were, you know, who wouldn't identify themselves as having any particular problem or consider themselves in need of a therapist. I mean, you know, for example, I have clients who are business owners, and some of them just they like to have a session, and it might be monthly or something like that, to just, you know, sort of clear out the cluttered thinking, notice the invisible stuff that they're tripping over, and get back to the kind of highest quality of mind that occurs when we're not caught up with the clutter. You know, once I see that my mind is cluttered, it tends to fall away, and clarity is revealed. For example, today I've had for various reasons, my mind has been cluttered. I'm having work done in the house and so on, and lots, and I'm, you know, I'm in chaos. but I knew I was going to be speaking to you, and I knew that as soon as I do that, my focus, I'm not that trivia doesn't need to take up space in my mind. I'm focused on our conversation and your questions, and I'm enjoying hanging out with you and getting to know you a bit. So yeah.
Beautiful. And what I see in people when they come to the understanding of 3P is that they get into the logical understanding of three principles. So this is what I was trying. Like my feelings are coming from my thoughts. So this is what I kept repeating, and I got more stuck in my head. So would you talk a little bit more about the nature of thought and how we can just like come out of this intellectual understanding of 3P?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we can. You see, I think, and it's lovely that you asked this question, and you're the second person. The other person was my mentor, who was saying that she was about to do a talk on a similar thing. And it seems to me that so there's no defined time scale in the 3 minutes. I mean, you can see, Sid had this massive experience where his whole life changed in a nanosecond, or maybe a bit longer, but whatever. And I also had a really profound experience when the first weekend I stumbled across this, but it wasn't. I'm not on a scale with what appears to have happened with Sid, but very life-changing for me. But it's continued to evolve, and sometimes I hear something new and I'm kind of thinking, yeah, that makes sense, but it's not really helping me. But I think that, so sometimes it's just like you get the whole shebang in one. You're the instant, head and heart are transformed in an instant, head, heart, and soul. Other times, I think there's the intellectual part comes first, and there can be a pause. It can take some time until it transforms at the heart and soul level. And you see, it seems to me that the intellect is smaller than the whole, inevitably, that the heart and soul is big. So the intellect can't make the heart and soul have a change. That happens when it happens. And I think that it's back to that humility, that we don't get an intellectual handle on this. We do not get a formula in words to make it happen. There is an element sometimes with aspects of it of we'll see it when we see it, which I know is very frustrating in our world, where it should all be reducible to the 10 points to get an insight, and yet it isn't. And if there were anything that would be helpful, because I think sometimes being too attached to getting an outcome or an insight can almost be the one thing that holds it at bay. So if there was anything that was going to be successful, it would be just like, have the most fun you possibly can in your life. Go and do what's juicy and attractive, and just park the issue. And my sense is that often that's when it changes the most quickly. I hope that's not too frustrating.
Beautiful. Exactly. When we try to understand the three principles through our intellect, we are using the same mind that we have to let go of. We are using this mind,
exactly.
this person, and this is what we have to let go of. Beautiful, beautiful.
Lovely. It's a bit like falling in love. I mean, it's going to happen to everybody, but the more you try and make it happen, the further away it seems.
True. Would you talk something about our true nature?
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that that's another word for. Were you on the conference about addiction in the Islamic world recently on?
Actually,
It
I'm
was an
sorry, I was
online.
not.
No, I came across the reason I ask is I came across a term that from Islam that is used, and I hadn't heard it before, called fitra, and they were explaining what that is. That each, I thought this is what I took from it, and forgive me if I get anything wrong, to anybody who's watching this, but we come into this world, each of us, with this essence that is love and connection, compassion, and a connection to the divine, and it seems to me that is our true nature, that it's there in everybody, and it can be covered up by apparently covered up by the illusion of thought and feeling, and and especially oh, never mind, especially that we can, it may appear that some people are so caught up in the thought, so determined, so whatever, but it's the true nature can never be destroyed. It's indestructible and eternal, and this is how I see it. And that's not a denial of the things that might happen to people in their lives, or the things that they might do when they're believing their thought, but underneath that garbage, that busyness, underneath that, the true nature is whole and perfect and indestructible, and that each of us, it remains unbroken. And I think that's why a friend of mine who's now quite an old lady in her 80s said that thing to me. She said, I'm an old lady now, Christian, but I don't feel old inside. And nobody feels old inside, because I think when we have that that bit of us is touching what's eternal. And soon after I got into this work, my dad died. And it was a really profound experience for me. It was only weeks after I discovered it. But I had a sense of having not expected this in advance. I didn't expect in advance it was going to die, but I also didn't expect in advance just the sense of connection, of ongoing connection with his love that I have had since then, which is now 11 years ago. There's something, yeah, that we all of us, even if we're new to this, we have some sense of that aspect of other people and ourselves, that if you take some time to give it some space and thought, and the more we look to that, the more we allow that to awaken and emerge and shine, the more it helps us, it seems to me. There's a Quaker expression of, look to see the God in everyone, and for me that, it's not some fanciful thing. There is a sense of what that's like, what that feels like.
Great. Oh, in 3P community, I see many people with the bipolar, depression, stress. They have had understanding of 3P. They know that their feelings are coming from thought, but still they don't have any change in themselves. So what is it that is stopping them from making the change? I mean, they know what this understanding is, but
Yeah.
they just don't realize it. I think it's like the intellectual understanding, not the clarity of mind.
Yeah. And of course, we live in a culture where people are being told things like, you have a chemical imbalance. They're being told by, doctors and psychiatrists are like gods in my culture, in the West, in Europe, and even more so in America. So if you have a doctor or a psychiatrist tell you that you have your problem is you have a chemical imbalance, you probably have that for the rest of your life, some 3P practitioner saying, I'll have a look at this, it's really it's your thinking is this doctor knows what he's talking about, and who's this clown? And I'm, and I'm also, I am very cautious because mental illness does exist. It's not separate to the principles. It's not out with the principles, but people can innocently use their minds so at such extremes against themselves that things occur. And I am not a psychiatrist. I have no aspiration to be, and I would be very slow to take on a client who is in the throes of something, severe psychotic illness, for example. I have someone very close to me who's going through that. He's not interested in the principles, and the first thing he needs is to see a psychiatrist, I think. Now, it isn't that the principles aren't at work in him, but he probably needs something, just as the whole of the body is designed to heal, but sometimes we need first aid. But yes, like you say, I think that people do, and there are psychiatrists who work with the three principles, and all of them will relate stories because they have this sort of godlike status in the patient's eye. So when they say something different, that can give the patient permission to see beyond the diagnosis. And there are people who have had spontaneous recoveries from mental, mental diagnoses. But it's, I would never want to say, there is an element of grace to this. And I don't mean that only some people can get it. I believe everybody's using the principles all the time, but mostly unconsciously, mostly innocently. And moments of insight, everybody has moments of insight, but there's something about being the recipient, just as we are we didn't create our own lives. We're the recipient of the life force. We didn't create it. And we're the recipients of grace and insight. So there's an element of allowing that to come to us, being willing and open and surrendering to it, but we can't force it. It's not my time. Thy will, not my will. Thy time, not my time. There's something of that to it, I'd say. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Great. Yes, that is. Okay. Our last question.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I can understand the three principles. They are mind, thought, and consciousness. But if I try to understand them intellectually, do you think it is a good idea?
No. I think it's no offense to Sid. I think their name is terrible. I think they are principles. I don't think that bit's. And I suppose gravity is one word. There's the explanation of what gravity is a lot more words. I almost never start there. I know you asked me today, but outside of something like that, if I'm having a conversation with a client or a group, I want to hear what's going on with them, and that will show me the way in. And, some people have a bit of a handle on the thought bit. Maybe they've done something like CBT, which is not the same at all, by the way, but they've got some handle on the thought bit. But they've very little handle on they're maybe thinking of themselves as broken or damaged. And it can be, I often start with the wellspring, the true self, whatever language seems appropriate from that person, because that's very encouraging to people. It's very reassuring. And when I say I start with that, I don't mean I lay it on them, as I have been with you today. But I would look for examples in their own life. As they start to talk to me about what their job is, or their family situation, or their hobbies, or life experience, I will look for examples so that it's not just me saying, well, I've got this theory and I'm just going to, and you can just believe it. It's not that at all. It's very much, this is true. And because it's true, there's going to be examples all through your life already. This has always been at work, but you have not been conscious of it until now, maybe. So I've seldom used those words, mind, thought, and consciousness, for client. Thought obviously comes up, more than
Exactly. Yeah, I also see people like making notes while listening to somebody talking about three-way. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Well, I had a huge advantage in that because I'd spent all these years at recovery meetings, and one of the things that happens there is people every meeting, if somebody tells their story or a bit of it, and no one ever uses notes to speak or takes notes in the audience. There is just a trust that what you need will be in the room. What I need to say will come out of me. And sometimes it flows more than others, and what everyone in the room says it. And I have complete faith in that in my work, today, that if I go into maybe a group thing, that what we need for the group to flourish will emerge from the group. And I mean, sometimes I have a little structure. If I've got, say a 90-minute meeting online and there's a lot of people, I might say, because I want to make sure people get the things that were promised in the flyer. But I mean, it literally would be 3 bullet points, just as a sort of aid memoir. Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. All right, Christian, it's been a great time with you. Before we leave, those who would like to follow you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and I frequently run little online webinars along with my mentor, Mavis Carn, and I try to make everything sort of affordable. And I have a website called Elements of Wellbeing, one word, .net. And I'm also LinkedIn, Twitter, all that stuff. But Facebook's probably the easiest place to find me.
All right, so I will leave all the details in the description. All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any last words before we leave?
No, I think it's great what you're doing, and I'm in the process, along with a number of other people here in Scotland, of setting up a local community called Three Principles Scotland. But maybe you'll consider doing something like that where you are.
Sure.
And it's sort of allied to the Three Principles global community. And sorry, can I say one thing about that? They're offering an apprentice program at the moment, which is, I think, wonderful and wonderful value. It's $100 for a year, and they're really getting into these sort of outreach. So anyone who's looking to train in this field, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, good for coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. All right, so Christian, I wish you a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you again. Okay, take care now. Bye bye.